Welcome to Between the Sheets, the podcast where we're going to cover a variety of topics related to sexual health and wellness. I'm Dr. Stephanie Zwonitzer, your host. I'm a nurse practitioner and have been in practice since 2017. I have my Doctor of Nursing Practice degree, and I specialize in urology and sexual health. I am so excited to explore all of the various topics related to sexual health and wellness with you in a fun, spicy, educational, and non-judgmental manner. So come on, let's get between the sheets. Hey, welcome back to Between the Sheets. I have a spicy show for you today. We have a guest here with us. We have Jordan Walker. Jordan's journey into sex and relationships education began by chance, evolving from awkward sex ed lessons into a passionate mission that now fuels his master's in sexology and his podcast, SuperSex. He provides workshops and one-on-one sessions for teens, special needs students, and adults, breaking the stigma and empowering everyone with accessible, fun, and honest education. Guided by equity, humor, and exploration, Jordan is on a mission to transform the conversation around intimacy. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. I'm super excited to be on this show as well.
Yeah. So for all of my listeners, you know, we cover all kinds of different educational topics and everything surrounded by sexual wellness. We're going to get into some pretty intense conversations today and some topics that may or may not float everybody's boat, but these are things that are out there in the sexual wellness world and community and things we need to talk about. And whether it's your cup of tea or not, knowing about these topics is important to progress the conversation, to progress the awareness that these things are okay and acceptable, and kind of just getting rid of these shame and stigmas around some of the more taboo topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we'll touch on today is fair enough. Some people might think that it is quite an extreme sort of practices, but the data shows us that a lot of people are actually fantasizing about these things. And if they're not fantasizing about it, they're stigmatizing these things. So there is some sort of health sort of inequality there where people are either they're fantasizing about it but not acting upon it, which of course can be healthy, but it can also be unhealthy as well to not follow your desires. But then again, it can also be one of these things where people are just stigmatizing it because, you know, they see it and they're not really challenging their own thoughts and appreciations around sexual practices.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, I have been more and more involved in learning different aspects of sexuality and sexual wellness. And certainly as you learn more, you grow more and you become more accepting of things that maybe when you first started out, you weren't. And I'm really hoping that this episode resonates with people in that way, that whether or not these things that we're going to talk about are something that you personally participate in, that's okay. You just knowing the awareness and that these are acceptable forms of sexual exploration and that, you know, you might meet somebody who loves these things. And by knowing a little bit about them, you're going to make that person feel so much more comfortable to talk to you about it and more accepted. And so I'm just all about pushing the boundaries and let's get this shame out of here because there is something for everybody out there in sexuality.
Oh yeah. Yes. I mean, that sort of what you said resonates a lot with my journey. At 18, I was a fresh grad teacher, didn't have a clue about anything to do with sex. I was a heterosexual, very cisgender, typical male. You know, I was the sort of guy that would be playing sport on the weekend and, you know, running out with his mates on the weekend. And outside of that, for me, sex was literally just penis and vagina, and that's it, right? There was no thoughts about pleasure or anything else. It was just, I was just on this heterosexual journey. My principal came into class one day and she said, "Hey, you talk really well to kids. We've got a lot of kids who have got a lot of sexual issues caused by, you know, either trauma or neurodivergency or something along those lines." And she said, "I want you to go out and start teaching the sex ed." And I'm like, okay, well, I'm completely underprepared for that. I am a HAS specialist. You know, I teach social sciences. I don't teach sex ed. I need some training. And she goes, "Take a year, do whatever professional learning you need." So I went off and done a whole year worth of professional learning. And at the same time, I sort of started investigating my own sexuality. And just that mere sort of listening to different conversations, listening to different podcasts like yours, and, you know, hearing different perspectives helped me to open up my sexuality and start a new journey, which has been incredibly transformative. So, exactly what you said, just investigating yourself is one of the key ways that we can, yeah, make our lives better, I suppose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's get into it.
Let's
So,
do
one of the
this.
topics that we're going to talk about today that we are not shy to go into is fisting. So, this
Yeah.
is something that you've got to work your way up to. You're not just going to go to it day one.
Uh huh.
But talk to me about fisting and how does someone approach that with their partner? How do you go from maybe one or two fingers to a fist? How's it work?
All right. So, fisting is one of those things that immediately, as soon as you say the word, people have got negatives like attachments towards it. Um, it is even more negative viewed through a heterosexual lens into the queer space. As soon as you say that you can take a fist in your backside, people are starting to look at you through different eyes. So there is that real big stigma. But essentially, what is happening in there is the part of the vagina. We'll talk about vaginal fisting, and anal fisting is a little bit different. Vaginal fisting, well, the vagina is sort of venerated with a whole heap of nerves all the way through, but it's tightly packed towards the entrance, right?
Mhm.
So the internal nerves are a little bit more, they're dull and they work on pressure rather than touch. So to feel full within the vagina is actually a really pleasurable sensation. And there's research coming out now as well, where there's very, very limited research on vaginal fisting. There's a lot more on anal fisting. But there's research coming out there now as well that that feeling of fullness actually stimulates a whole heap of different nerve responses and can help calm the body in ways that, you know, other sorts of stimulation just does not do. So that feeling of fullness within the vagina is massive. Anally, you can actually get up like really deep. Anal fisting can get towards the vagus nerve, which can, as you well know, stimulating the vagus nerve is one of those things that can relax the whole system down. So there are different reasons why people do it. Some people might be doing it for sensation based. Some people really just love that feeling of being super super full. Some people might be doing it as a challenge to themselves. Other people might be doing it to, oh, how can I say this? Sort of degrade themselves and feel degraded and get off on that sort of submissive and dominant element and that
Yeah.
degradation element. So there's a few different ways that it can actually happen, but you're so right. You cannot just jump straight into it because if you do, that's when things are going to start getting problematic.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the tips that you have for somebody who is wanting to explore this? And how do they go from an anal plug or a finger to being able to take a whole fist?
All right. So it works a little bit differently for anal and for vaginal.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of vaginal, it's one of the best ways that you can do it is a perineum stretch. So basically, got my little vulva right here. And basically, what you can do is you can put your fingers into the sort of vagina and you can
Mhm.
start pulling down towards the anus just ever so gently, right? And that will start over time stretching the vagina. Well, when I say stretching, it's not actually stretching. It's almost as though you are training a set of muscles the same way that a gymnast does. I mean, a lot of people think that if you can be fisted, then your holes are going to be absolutely ruined forever, which is absolutely not the case. I mean, when you see a gymnast do the splits, do you ever see her walking around with floppy legs all the time? No,
No.
because it's just not the way that muscles work. Or when you
Right.
take a bite out of a massive burger and you really open your mouth, do you ever see people walking around with like a jaw that's flapping around? No, you don't, because our muscles are designed to stretch and also to come back into place. So basically, with this slow sweep stretching, what you're doing is you are allowing the tissues around the entrance to the vagina to start learning, hey, I can stretch here. And it's really, really done with different sort of creams or oils. There's a perineum cream and there's also a vitamin E cream, which works really, really well. Because what that does is it takes the sort of sting out of that stretch. And what it
Mhm.
does, it also helps to lubricate and hydrate the skin around as well. But what I will say is that you do need to do this as a slow, slow measure. It's not something that you're going to build up to overnight. But basically, you can get to 2 fingers, 3 fingers, inserted. And then when you can comfortably do that, I would suggest to play around inside and see what parts actually feel good. If this is
Mhm.
something that your partner actually does want to do, because they may not. It might not be something that they're comfortable with. They might like the idea of it, but not actually want to go full bore into it. But if they are
Yeah.
into it and they're feeling those nice sort of sensations, then you can see whether it's, it's on the top of the fornix or the bottom part of the fornix. They're technical terms, but for most people listening, that's just the top and bottom of the cervix where it joins into the vagina. Um, but you can play around with that with comfortably pretty much with 3 fingers. When you get to the fourth finger, you're pretty good up until the third set of knuckles. The
Mm.
third set of knuckles is where people really start struggling. But what you basically need to do is lube, 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 and take it very, very slowly. Some people can never get past these knuckles.
Okay.
But essentially, what you want to do is you want to create like a sort of duck bill.
Mhm.
They call it a silent duck. And you want to tuck your thumb underneath your
Okay.
fingers and basically slowly, slowly enter in. I always recommend to people to go knuckles down, so knuckles facing the anus, because the knuckles, if they're facing up, can sometimes rub on that pubic bone, which can be a
Mhm.
little bit painful. And those sensations are already very heavy for a person with vagina, so they're gonna be feeling that quite a lot. But in saying that, everybody's different. So you need to talk to your partner. You need to ask your partner. You need to constantly be checking in. Um, so again, slowly, 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 entering it in slowly. And the other good thing about having that sort of the knuckles down is that at any one point during, you can always add more lubricant into the actual hand as well. So on lubricant, though, I would always suggest firstly playing around with the different types of lubricants because different lubricants have different sort of pH levels and balances, and it could throw off a vagina's pH very, very quickly. So I always say if you're going to do it, I would do it with either a silicone or an oil based lubricant. I would coat the vagina, I would coat the hand up with that first. And what that does is that creates a barrier, a barrier which then you can put a water based lubricant on. Water based
Okay.
lubricants are a lot thicker, depending on which one you get, but they're a lot thicker. And it's almost as though they've got a lot more cushion to them, but they also dry out a lot because they're getting absorbed into the skin because they're just water, right? So if you put the oil base on or the silicone based on first, and then you put the water based on, what you're going to do is you're going to stop that evaporation into the skin and it's
Mhm.
going to stick around a lot longer. So you're going to save yourself quite a bit of money as well if you're
Yeah.
playing around with this, a couple of times a week. So, um, pretty much that's the way to go. If you really want to ramp it up, you can wear gloves. What gloves do is they basically do the same thing as the lubricant, but they also smooth out all the surfaces and textures in the hand, which, again, for a person with vagina and anus, they can be really, really sensitive to that. Like some people have said that they can feel fingertips,
Interesting.
within it. So they've got like a lot of sensations within that. So gloves are another way that you can really, really help that process smooth out. But in saying all of this, if you do want to get to fisting,
Mhm.
this sort of training and stretching needs to happen, I would say twice a week at
Okay.
least, because the way the vagina works, the way the anus works, if you're not always using it, it contracts back down to its natural normal size. And if you go for a week or two without doing it, you'll find that basically all of your gains will
Yeah.
pretty much go.
So for I love what you said about needing to stretch the vagina, and if you don't use it, it's going to go back to that same
Mm.
size, because so many women get nervous if they're having too much sex, too many partners, using large dildos, things like that, that it will stretch them out and they will stay open. But
No.
that's not the case. And the vagina tissue is so elastic that what you're saying makes so much sense, that you really need to train it and use, the stretching techniques, and it will allow you to do that then, but it's
Yeah.
not going to leave this gaping hole while you're walking around.
Absolutely not. I mean, it's essentially what we're doing is it's like training for the gym. You know, you can go in and you can lift a 5 kilo weight. And eventually that will get to a certain point where it's not quite enough anymore. So you need to start upping it. You know, but when you leave the gym, your muscles aren't constantly tense. They're not.
Mhm.
They're not constantly rigid. And it's the same with the vagina. What we're doing is we're capacity building. We're not permanently stretching. There are a subsect of people out there who do want to be permanently stretched, and that is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about here is we're talking about capacity building, where you have the capacity to take fists or larger toys, but you also have the capacity to enjoy regular penis and vagina sex or finger sex or whatever your sex is. You've got
Right.
the capacity to really enjoy that as well.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay, so for anal, there are, I mean, I just know from being on websites and things like that, and in my own life, like there are trainers for anal,
Yep.
different size
Yep.
plugs and things like that. So you're not necessarily always having to use someone's fingers and stuff. So there's maybe a little bit more variety in how you can stretch and learn to stretch anally.
Yes. Yes. So anal stretching is one of those that you need to take very, very slowly because the complex musculature around the anus it's far more complex than a vagina. There's just so many more muscles there. And if you do push it too far, there's more embarrassing consequences, let's call it that. Right.
Yes.
So you do want to be a lot more careful with it. But with the trainers, a lot of people will walk into an adult shop or a sex shop or whatever they're going into, and they'll just buy a trainer set off the shelf,
Hmm.
which is okay. But I would encourage you to have a look at the products that it's made with. You should always be going with either a glass or a steel or a high body safe silicon. The reason
Okay.
for this is that a lot of the sex toys that we just buy off our regular shelves, the sort of cheaper ones, they are made with a mix of silicons and plastics or just straight out plastics. The
Hmm.
problem with that is that they've got micro holes in them. And when you're inserting that into an anus, it's collecting bacteria and you can't wash it out. You can't you can't boil it down the way that you can with a silicon toy. So high grade silicon toys, like I'll give a shout out to Mr. Hankies or Bad Dragon. Um, Square Peg also do them. Those toys you can actually put in a pot of boiling water and you can boil them for 10 minutes. All that bacteria is gone
Yeah.
and you're free to use it. But with the lower grade toys, what you are going to be doing is you're going to be adding bacteria to that. And no matter how much commercial cleaner you use, whatever, you're never going to be able to clean that off. And in fact, you might even make it worse by using different sort of cleaners because they start to erode the textures of the actual toy. So I would suggest, firstly, investing in a really high quality toy, and your eyes are always bigger than your hole. I would always suggest whatever you sit there and think, oh yeah, I could take that. Go the next step down, work up to it, work up to it. And you should only really be making a jump up in size of about a quarter inch diameter each time. Because if you go too quick, that's when problems can start to happen. Um, if you stretch it out really, really quickly, you can get tearing
Hmm.
within the anus, and you can get tearing within the vagina as well, depending how quickly you do it. But you can get tearing within it. If you get that tearing within that muscular structure, like the skin is one thing, but if you tear that muscular structure, that's very, very, very difficult for surgeons to put back together. In fact, I've had conversations with some gastrointestinal surgeons who have just said, "Listen, we've had people who've come in here who've been using extreme toys, and there's just no way to fix them.
Mhm.
It's not a fixable thing that we can do. So start slow, go slow, 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 and remember as well, without a base, without a trace, the end point of the rectum is the mouth. So there's this massive big link right there. And if the toy that you're using isn't specifically designed for anal play, there is a chance that it gets sucked up. And you really don't want to get into a situation where you're going into ER with a toy in your backside that you just can't get out, you know? And yeah, I
Because
think
we
a
will
lot of,
definitely tell your story at home at the dinner table. You
oh
should
my
see what
God.
this guy came in with. Oh my gosh, this lady had this big of a dildo in her. They're great stories, but they are not things you want to actually live out.
Oh, I can imagine. I once had a conversation with a emergency nurse who had seen a pumpkin within the rectum, and
Wow.
yeah, she was saying, you know, basically every doctor had to come round and see how to get it
Of
out.
course.
Of course, they weren't qualified to do that, but they did,
Right.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
they're consulted for something though, because they got to check it
exactly.
out.
They've got to check it out. So, yeah, you don't want to be that person. So, without a base, without a trace, use a high quality toys with the base and start slow. So, that would be best advice.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think it's so important too that this is not just for, a certain sect of people. It's not just a homosexual male type of play. Women like this, men like it. You men in heterosexual relationships like it because there are different pleasure areas within the rectum. And
Mm,
like you were saying, if you get as high as the vagus nerve, that's a totally different sensation.
absolutely.
And if you do it slowly, like you're saying, and you're careful to not cause tears and things, there really aren't health reasons that prevent you from doing this type of play.
Mm. No, I mean, actually, it's almost the opposite. So, on our podcast a few months back, we had a pelvic floor specialist come on, and we started talking about fisting and whatnot. And the whole conversation basically went, a lot of women's pelvic floor is actually too tight. They're doing all these Kegels and whatnot, and they're making it tighter and tighter and tighter, but they don't realize that they're actually making themselves a larger and larger problem.
Mhm.
Basically, the inverse of that is to train your body to relax.
Yeah.
What is one of the best ways to train your body to relax? A little bit of size play, a little bit of fisting. It doesn't need to go all the way, but allowing your body to learn and understand, and those receptors within the muscles to understand that, hey, I can relax and still be okay. That's one of the best ways that we can do it. And your vagina's not going to fall out. Your cervix is not going to fall out unless you're actually specifically training to do that, which is a massive task.
Right, right. Or if you happen to be one of my ladies with prolapse, that's a whole nother discussion. We will take care of that completely differently. You can do all the
Yep.
Kegels you want. If you are a lady who's getting prolapse, it's going to come out. We will take care of it surgically or with a pessary. But, I love what you're saying because it's so true. And it's so great to have people explore different options and to know that here we are in the sex medicine field and we're saying it's okay to explore this and it's not even unhealthy to explore this. So,
Mm.
if that's your excuse with your partner, sorry, check it out of the way. You got to be more honest than that because it's not a health reason that you can't do it.
No, absolutely not. And if it's a fantasy of yours and you're holding on to it and you're not exploring it, it's probably more unhealthy as well. So get out there, talk
Absolutely.
to your partner about it.
Yes. And ongoing consent as always. I love that you talked about that as well, even while you're doing it, and you may not ever get to the whole fist. Maybe the three fingers is where you stop or whatever. And just figuring out that balance and where you're at, just that ongoing consent is so important.
Yeah, that check-in process is huge. And it doesn't need to be constantly every couple of minutes. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? It's reading body language. You know, it's having a look at where the eyes are. It's looking at how the mouth curls up. It's how's that facial structure? What's happening there? Are they pushing your hand away? Are they pulling away from your hand? What's going on there? And if you're starting to notice some of those, then check in verbally. But if you're not, you can sit there and go, hey, I'm just going to try this. Tell me what you think, and there are sexier ways to ask for consent and if things are happening rather than, is it okay if I'm doing this? If it's okay if I'm doing this, blah blah blah.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to our another taboo topic that has a lot of stigma with it that should not. Let's talk about
Mm.
cuckolding.
Oh, okay. So
I love
this
this
one,
topic.
yeah,
There's so many
this
guys
one's got
out there
huge.
that, have these high power jobs, high profile, and they really love being dominated or giving up control, or, different ways you could describe it. And it was fascinating to me to learn this because
Mm,
growing up, we have been taught such a toxic masculinity that you would never share. That would not, and for some guys, it's a big deal and they really enjoy the act of sharing and watching their partner be pleased by someone
mm.
else.
Yeah. So the opposite of jealousy is a thing called compersion. Compersion is basically you just deriving enjoyment from your partner's enjoyment. Um, I mean, cuckolding has got these, it's got this really bad stigma. And you know that thing where people do that behind your
Yeah.
head? Like you've seen
Yeah.
it, it's little two finger things behind your head. That's an actual medieval terminology for cuckolds because that
Oh,
was a way
interesting.
to sort of like point them out in a crowd, you know, or this person's wife is playing around and he doesn't have a clue and whatnot. So it goes back a long time, but it's still stigmatized in today's society. Why? Because basically we've got this very heteronormative male dominant perspective on sex, and the idea is that the man can do whatever he wants, but the woman needs to be subservient to the man and follow his will. And she should never want to stray because if she strays, that's showing how inferior that man's sexuality is and how she needs to go and get it somewhere else because he's just not good enough, which is not actually the case. So people do see all this and maybe they're not even logically thinking about this, but it's there. We've got these sexual social scripts that are inbuilt into us. And people are coming out and they've got these negative ideas on it. And that can sometimes play into it for the cuck. They might get off on that idea. They might get off on breaking the taboo with that social script. They might get off on the degradation of it, you know, being completely degraded, being completely dominated by it. There's also another interesting layer where it's just about seeing their partner celebrate their sexuality. There might be no submission. There might be no degrading. There might be no element of taboo. It might just simply want to see their partner celebrating their sexuality. And I think that's a part of cuckolding that a lot of people just never think about because they only think of dominance, submission. Um, but this idea of celebrating sexuality is actually really wonderful. And I think that the people that engage in this, what they're doing is they're understanding that one of the sexiest things that a woman can be is in charge of her own sexuality. And when they give her license to be able to follow through with that and they watch it and they see that, that's the ultimate compersion. And it's seeing her essentially spread her wings and fly. And a large portion of cucks get off on that. So it's
Yeah,
very
it's really a
interesting.
beautiful relationship, and I think the level of communication and trust that are in these relationships far superior to most heterosexual relationships.
Oh, yes.
You think especially in the day and age of that we're in with all of the social medias and cell phones and hidden apps and all of these ways that you can cheat and get
Mm.
around and not tell your partner about certain things, but people in this hot wifing, cuckolding, this whole relationship dynamic, they celebrate it and they
Yep.
talk about it. And there are boundaries and rules, and there are different ones for every couple that's out there. But I love the level of connectedness that these
Mhm.
couples have.
Yes, totally. I think what people don't get as well is they think that once you're in a cuckolding relationship, it's a 24/7 dynamic. It is not, right? You your partner might basically go out there and play for 1 hour every 6 months. They might go out there and do it once a year. The rest of the time, you're at home, you're happy, you're connecting. But in order to get to that point, you need to have so many discussions and you need to be able to lay your soul out on a table. And your partner needs to be able to receive that and not throw back shame or stigma or any sort of horrible things, but be able to sit there and go, you know what? Okay, I get this. I'm willing to run with you on this and I'm willing to explore this with you. And
Mhm.
I suppose when you think about it, especially since like COVID locked us all down. You know, it locked us all down physically, it locked us all down in a sort of spiritual way as well. But the beautiful thing that COVID did allow us to do is to start celebrating and exploring our sexualities. And that was a way that we sort of push boundaries, you know. I always used to go and travel and jump off waterfalls and climb mountains and all that sort of stuff to sort of push boundaries. But now I found that I can challenge myself just as much within a sexual realm. And that sort of it lights that fire in a very, very similar way. But in order to do that, you need to have massive, massive conversations with your partners. And I think there was a study a long time ago, I think by Byers, that actually said that there's only 30% of couples that actually communicate effectively about sex. 30%. But yet, when you read about in Justin Lamiller's latest book, Tell Me What You Want, I think the stats there for people, both male and female, who want to or fantasizing about group sex is well above 70%. You know, the cuckolding fantasy is well above 20%. So there's a lot of people there who are having these fantasies, but they're not comfortable enough to talk about them. And talking about it, it doesn't just lead to cuckolding or size play or fisting or whatever it
Mhm.
is. It leads to a relationships that's deeper, that's more complex, that is more beneficial and positive for each partner. And it's yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful thing to start talking.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, I have friends that are at various aspects of the lifestyle, if you will, and just watching their dynamic and their communication, it spurs so much inside of me and it excites me so much because of the level of connectedness and
Mm,
communication that they have with each other. And I mean, I'm sure this isn't true across the board, but it just feels like their love for each other is on a deeper level because
yeah.
they are so connected and so open with each other. And for some people, it might just be the fantasy and talking about it with each other and, having dirty talk with this fantasy during your sexual experiences. And that's enough. You don't actually want to explore it in real life. You just want the fantasy. And for other people, they do want to explore it in real life. And that's great too. It's so awesome to me to watch these couples, not even in sexual situations, just out to dinner with me or
Yeah.
whatever. And their level of love and connection is so deep. I love it.
It's very, very true. I mean, because when you think about it, there's really 2 core elements to a relationship, right? There's love and there's sex. But when you take sex away and say that's something that we both enjoy and we play with, but really now we're focusing on the love, and that's where these couples get to, you know? They sex isn't such a big thing anymore. It's something that, like, it might just be like going down to the bar and having a couple of drinks to some of the people in the lifestyle, you know? It's just as easy as that. So when you stop that focus on sex, which is it seems strangely contradictory, you know, we're talking about having sex with different people, but you're not really focused on sex. But your relationships become so much deeper because you're actually focusing on the person rather than the sex that you are having or not having. Let's say that.
Absolutely. And I know, like you were saying, how it's not all the time, it's sometimes, and I know a friend of mine who, twice a year, they
Mm,
take a trip out to Vegas. So they have a vacation with each other. And while they're there, they engage in this type of activity. And so it's not every day.
mm.
But it's also them connecting and getting a vacation time together and a deeper level. And then this is also something they do while they're there. But I
Yes.
just love that. I think it's so great to have these moments and the discussions. When is it going to happen? What is it going to look like for you? How does that handle your relationship? And again, like we talked about before, that ongoing consent, you debrief afterwards. You have the
Right.
aftercare. You talk about it now and you say, you know what? I really wasn't that comfortable with this particular part of it. Let's not
Yeah.
do that particular thing anymore. Or,
Mhm.
hey, this really turned me on. Let's definitely do that again.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those experiences that sits on the outer limits of what we should be doing or what we feel as though we should be doing as human beings, right? So we're already predisposed to sort of have heightened emotions around that, to have heightened anxieties and whatnot. But I would say it's like climbing a mountain. I climbed Kilimanjaro with my wife back in 2016, and you push yourself physically and emotionally to a point where you're so present within that moment. And then when you come back down from that mountain, you get an absolute wave of really good endorphins, really good hormones are flushing through your system. You're exhausted, you're emotionally spent, but you have experienced something at the very edges of your capability. But what that does as well, in that debriefing moment, it helps you to connect with your partner, and it gives you that really deep connection. It's almost like Stockholm syndrome, which is
Yeah.
really strange to say, but like you're going through such an intense set of emotions with a partner, and if you do that debrief right, like you say, and have those conversations right, it is so much more bonding than regular vanilla sex. Let's call it that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this is such a fascinating discussion. I wish we had more time to get into even more topics because I love how open you are with these and your passion for teaching people about this is amazing. But I just really appreciate you being here. And of course, there will be links in the show notes so that you guys can all get in touch with Jordan and learn more about what he does with the education side of things, which is very exciting as well because our teens are not
Yeah.
taught well at all. So I'm
No.
excited that you get into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's become a passion of mine, really. I've seen what great sex ed can do for teens and how that links up in their lives afterwards, because I've kept a sort of track with a few of my students afterwards, and I've seen what really bad sex ed does, and I've seen the shame and stigma and the sexual behavioral problems that comes from putting shame and stigma on a young child. So um yeah, if you're a parent listening or anybody, just be positive.
Yeah. And open. Let them know they
Yeah,
can come talk to you. Because
yeah,
I can't tell you, I have a teenage son and I have a teenage daughter as well, but my son's friends are over all the time. And the things they come and ask me about, because of course they know that this is what I do for a living, and they ask me all kinds of questions. They ask me things that you're like, oh my God, you watched that in porn, didn't you? And you're just like, that's not real sex. Like, you know?
no,
And so, yeah, I want there to be better education out there. But even if where you live, there isn't a program like this, be open with your kids and be that person that they can come to. I think that's such great advice.
absolutely. Just little micro discussions is where it's at. You're sitting down as a family watching something on Netflix. You see a relationship that's got some green flags or some red flags. Point them out to your kid, and don't just point out the red flags, because if we're teaching kids to only look for red flags, some people are really good at hiding red flags. So when they get into a relationship, they're sitting there going, oh, I'm not seeing any red flags, but I'm not seeing any green flags either. I don't know what I should be looking for. So, celebrate what a great relationship is, model that for your kids. And yeah, that's just have those micro conversations every single day. And it will be so much more beneficial for your kid.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Jordan, thank you so much for being here.
Absolute pleasure, Stephanie. Anytime. I'd love to chat with you
Awesome.
again.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back because these are great conversations that we need to keep pushing. So I love it so much. Thank you very much for being here. Everybody, I hope you have a great day and go have some fun between the sheets. Thank you for listening and spending time with me today. You can catch new episodes of Between the Sheets every Wednesday. Because what better way to add some spice to your life than to have a new podcast on Hump Day? We will continue to explore common, uncommon, and taboo topics related to sexual health and wellness. Please send any comments, questions, or stories to podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. That's all one word, podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. Have a great day. And remember how important it is to discuss these topics with your friends, your family, and of course your partners. In fact, you can like, follow, and share this podcast so they can see it too. See you next time for more sexual health topics between the sheets.